mostly decorative because if there's any failure, they pause the countdown. And so it's just like a.
Stop littering, Graham.
I get turned into a real thing because they do a variety of checks during it now.
Yeah. But I do love how science fiction has shaped so much of actual science. Science fiction.
As I'm getting this going,
Dragons are real. Dragons are real.
Absolutely.
Dragons are
dragons are real?
They're real.
Yeah.
Excellent.
On the Welsh flag.
The Welsh flag isn't real, don't be silly. Okay,
How dare you?
we started DNA. We gave you a little bit of history.
Sugar.
Wait. Do not push it.
You already have, no, this is from last day.
This is a new one. No, it's not.
Yeah, no, but you've already done this. This one. This is
Yeah,
first
yeah,
page.
I just-
But we're not going to recopy it now. Get it afterwards from someone who's done it. And if you email me, I'll post it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you can just get it down. Because if you're away, I don't want to spend the time redoing all of the other class. Because it needs to come with explanations. Watch the YouTube video. Did a few experiments to show the bacteria changed their behavior. That's on the next slide. We talked about Rosalind Franklin, who should have been credited with Watson and Crick for the discovery of DNA, because it's her X-ray crystallography that really clinched it. We had an experiment in which I used a really bad example with students in the class in JTF2 and people getting killed on how you could use DNA to transform bacteria to either kill or not kill a mouse. That highlighted that it was actually DNA that was carrying information and not proteins. At the time, people really thought it was going to be proteins. There's much more variety in their structure. It could be much more information dense. But it turned out DNA was actually it. We talked about the structure of DNA, one unit being a nucleotide. Those units are paired. It's known as complementary base pairing. They are put on either side, twisted to make a double helix. There is a space filling model there to show kind of what it looks like. It has a major and minor groove when you follow it around. You can buy a model. It's about this tall. For the classroom, it's about $3,000. And it costs about $2,000 to ship. So at the end of a future class, I'm going to pass around a hat. So if you could just take $5,000, divide it by 3 classes, 60 people, figure out what your contribution should be, and we'll get Ms. Allen to do that. A always bonds with T, C always bonds with G. This was discovered by Chargaff. And said, well, there isn't then a repeat. This eventually became Chargaff's rule in his honor. And then you should have drawn a structure. Does everybody have a structure of this way? Do you have the simple form of the structure like this as well? Excellent. I see some nods. Have we done this? No. Excellent. Then I will switch to your actual notes. Your actual notes after crash, so I don't have them, so I'd open up an older one. But I'll start writing on it so I can write fresh. This is somewhat unfortunate in that nucleotides bond is here. Nucleotides bond. So there are the bonds. Those aren't regular bonds. They're drawn with a dash on purpose because they're a special type of bond we haven't discussed. The dashes is a hydrogen bond. Not a bomb, but a bond, which is a very temporary bond. It exists when you have a hydrogen bonded to something really negative. And the classic example is water that has one of the strongest hydrogen bonds. None of those bonds I've drawn are hydrogen bonds. It's because this oxygen is really negative, and so it actually steals some of the electrons in the bond. They just hang out on the side a little bit more often. So this is slightly negative. And this hydrogen, because it's having its electrons stolen away, is slightly positive. So very temporarily, there's a positive and negative, and they sort of stick. like little magnets. You have a positive and negative end. It's known as a hydrogen bond. If you go on in biology or chemistry, you'll talk a lot about hydrogen bonds. I don't spend a lot of time on it this year, but that's what these represent. And so we'll put in here, it's a hydrogen bond. If all you know for grade 10 is the label, that's fine, but I never like just give you the label without explaining why. It's holding your paper together right now. The individual paper fibers from the wood pulp are not bonded together with glue. It's just dried. So if you can make paper by taking paper, dissolving it in water, mushing it up, and just re-flattening it. And then when it dries, you have new paper. It just holds itself together. You don't have to add glue. It's because the paper fibers have lots of hydrogen bonds and they just stick to each other, which is why it falls apart in water. Water also has hydrogen bonds. So this is what's holding DNA together. It's a very weak bond that allows us to unzip it and then read what's inside. If I was to label these, let's make sure I get them correct. I believe this one would be, let me check at the bottom. Yeah. This would be G. Oh, that's the wrong color for green. G and C. And this would be A, and this would be T. What is the difference between the two?
The two what? The two what?
The two bonded nucleotides. What's the difference between the top and the bottom? Yeah. It has one less bond. So G and C bond with 3 hydrogen bonds, and T and A bond with 2 hydrogen bonds. This is why they match, because they line up perfectly. So if you took an A and tried to bond it here, it wouldn't match. There'd be a leftover one. The spacing, although here it might look like the spacing is the same, it's not quite the same, and it wouldn't bond. And so that's how your the DNA makes sure that that is consistent every single time. They fit together like little Lego blocks. Anybody here did not play with Lego as a child? Lucky people, well done. I received Lego for Christmas every year until I was 42. And then I didn't. And I'm still bitter about it. Okay, there are 4 different bases in DNA. Let's see if you know what they are. I've been reliably told by Meta that this was taught to you last year and that you cut up little pieces of paper and made a DNA model. True?
Maybe.
You made it out of paper? Vaguely. Some people are like, yeah, some people are like, oh my god, I hope I'm not asked a question. However,
we did, I couldn't figure it out.
Aiden, what is the base A? What's its actual name?
I don't know.
There you do. I want you to stare at the screen.
Can't see that.
But it's on your paper.
Yeah,
Is it too? Do you need glasses? Adenine?
I have bad eyes.
Adenine.
Get glasses. Get glasses.
I have.
Do you normally have glasses?
I have them.
Contacts.
You're not allowed contacts till you're 16.
What?
You need to go, you're not old enough to do training until you're 16. It's like driving for some reason.
Find a doctor who doesn't care about that. They do this. Because I know lots of students who do have contacts. You can also order them online, but bring your glasses to class, please. If you don't have your glasses or contacts next day, I might move you to the very front. Maybe like right here, so you can see. Because I am disappointed if you can't see, it just makes me sad. Jamie, number 2, T. I haven't done attendance yet. I should do that next. Rose.
She's also not here.
Liam Baker.
Oh, it's thymine.
Thymine.
Thymine. Oops.
Thymine works.
Rid of the Y.
I was a student in Physics 11 who was talking about infrared light. And my teacher literally laughed and made fun of me because the real word is infrared. Graham, number 3.
Side design?
Cytosine. And Bo for G.
Guanine or something?
Guanine. Guanine.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. Well done.
Guanine.
I thought it looked like the word guano.
Now, is the
I think of guacamole.
to be honest, similar root. Does anybody have a thought in the back of the head? Isn't there a fifth one? Do you remember a fifth one? And if you do you know what it's called? If you don't remember what it's called, do you know what it's used for? Why isn't it here? I'm just going to wait in silence. If you don't remember, the fifth one is uracil. It's only found in RNA. We're talking about DNA. It actually replaces one of those. Next day, come back, tell me which one it replaces. Okay, next up. I emphasized Chargaff's rule down here several times. This is G, it goes to C. So we can see guanine has the 2, and it goes to that 1. What's that one? Miyabi. T. Because it has a single, which of course I won't ask someone because that becomes very obvious. Goes to A. The bases always match. And I say always, but it's a bit of a lie in the sense that if it doesn't match, that's a mistake, and you could get cancer. It's a mutation. Because if it doesn't match and it stays there, then when DNA replicates, the mistake will be copied. And that's literally the mutation, that's the raw supply for evolution, but it is also the raw supply for cancer. Over time, you will accumulate some errors. But normally, every day, thousands of times a day, as you grow or not mutate, hopefully not, it should be replicating and matching when your cells divide. This was another spot where I just want to emphasize G going to C. I don't know, I did it so many times in here, and at this point I'm thinking maybe too many times. And then I have a variety of ways to remember it. Does anybody have some from last year? Yes?
Round ones and sharp ones.
That's the one I use. How did you know that? Have I said this before?
I just thought of that.
Yeah,
That's
no,
really
it works.
exciting.
Because, look, they cuddle. They're round. You've got the big spoon and the little spoon, and they're cuddling there. They're friends. It works. And then you have A and T. Also, they just cuddle. They're pointy. Your mouth is open. You're looking shocked. That's how I remembered it all through university. It's the only way I knew. But other students came, well, in Meta, we learned Colgate. I'm like, okay, hail corporate. C, G, A, T. That works. Another one I have seen that students have liked is apple tree. Not apple tree. What the heck are you doing?
Where's the C and the G?
I'm not done yet. Apple tree and car garage. Words that kind of go together, and apple tree, car garage, remember those two, and you'll remember that A goes to T and C goes to G. Sure. Any way that those go. They're not opposites. However, what do we call it when two things go together very well? What happens if you go into a restaurant and you get something with your meal? It's complementary. This is called complementary based pairing. I also like that with the whole snuggling aspect because they're complementing each other. Okay. Complementary base pairing is that whole wow, mine is making an error, is that whole A to T and G to C. There's more on this page, more on this page. Does anybody need this page for longer? Yes.
If water breaks down the hydrogen bonds in paper, why doesn't the water in our body break down our DNA?
If it was allowed access, unfettered access, it could eventually. DNA itself isn't. That is such a fantastic question because I can use that to go back to explain the structure. It would if DNA looked like this, but DNA doesn't look like that. It looks like this. And that winding literally protects it. DNA is a much more stable molecule than RNA for that reason, and it's coiled in such a way to protect it from all of that things. It is long-term storage. Even though it's opened up every day, it's opened up every day to make copies, and it stays in the nucleus. The messages, you did protein synthesis last year, ribosomes. The messages go out to the rest of the cell and we get copied and read. DNA doesn't leave the nucleus. So it would, but it is protected in that particular way. One of our theories, and to use it in, I shouldn't use that in a science class, one of our hypothesi is that DNA is not the original molecule of life. It's actually RNA. RNA is much easier to make from random scrap you find in a pond. We find organic molecules on meteorites when they crash. Apparently organic gunk just gets made in space. And mRNA, like compounds, seem to be made. DNA might be an evolved form of RNA that was made to be more protected, so it's less likely to mutate. If you mutate too fast, you die. It's bad for evolution. You have to mutate at the right rate. So, good question. Nope, not that one. What did I put down on these? There it is. Okay, we have it here on the right. I'll refer to it in a little bit. Cells in a variety of different stages of what process you learned last year. I don't know if you did the, pardon? Mitosis. Mitosis is how cells divide, or as I like to call it, mitoses, because mitosis is how you grow. Mitoses, because as you get bigger, you make more cells. Your cells do not get bigger. You get more cells, which is why I have a higher risk of cancer than all of you. Because I am bigger than you, so I have more cells. So I just have more lottery tickets for one of them to go bad and go rogue and give me cancer. The larger you are, the larger the risk because of that. So if you are tiny, you literally have less cells, your risk actually decreases. Yeah, just be tiny. Where is DNA always found? What organelle? Nucleus. Pardon?
And that's something horribly is going
Oh yeah, that's something horribly is going on. I also should put this in quotes. It's always found in the nucleus, except when it's not. Sometimes the nucleus dissolves during the process of mitosis, and you know that. But if there's a nucleus there, that's where the DNA is supposed to be. Chromosomes, DNA in human cells is not a long continuous strand like I implied the other day when I said if you took all the DNA out of your cells and laid it out end to end, you would have 2 meters. And if you took it out of every single one of your cells and laid it out end to end, you would die because you wouldn't have any DNA strands. The 2 meters has to be packed in, but it's not packed in. It's not one single strand. You have 46 separate strands or 23 pairs. Why do we prefer to say 23 pairs? Yes. Father and mother. You got one from your biological mom and one from your biological dad. And I do have to emphasize biological mom and biological dad because it turns out, having read about a case last year, that not everybody pays attention in science class. There was a young man who married someone, and then she and her children took a DNA test, And so did he, and he found out that children were not genetically related to him. So he sued her. The children pre-existed before their relationship. As in, he met her when she already had children. They dated, and then apparently he thought the children would become biologically his. There are court documents. I would like to say that this is made up on the internet. There are court documents that I read that in which he argues that. So, you get one from your biological mom, one from your biological dad. As Guardians of the Galaxy has shown us, that may be your biological dad, but that may not be your daddy. But you get your chromosomes from your biological dad. And these are called chromosomes. Now, that is the case simply because that's how sexual selection works and sexual reproduction works. We are near the point where that might not always be the case. For example, DNA is always found in the nucleus. There is one other organelle you can find. Does anybody know what it is? That's where the DNA is. Where else? There is another organelle you can find. It is an organelle you do not make. It is one of the most important mitochondria. So, the powerhouse of the cell. Yeah. mDNA, which is fortunate in our language that it has an M in front, because it's also maternal DNA, because when the egg is fertilized, all of the organelles come from mom. So you're actually slightly more related to mom than you are to your dad, because that's where your organelles came from. If you want to trace your maternal line, you can do it through your mitochondria. Now, the reason I say this two parents might not always be the case, there are people who have a mitochondrial disease. Their mitochondria don't work properly. They have a variety of health problems. So what do you do to fix that? What you do is if you have this disease and you're going to have children, rather than using your own eggs, because your eggs have this, but all the chromosomes are fine, you take someone else's egg that's been donated, you remove the chromosomes, and you put in your own chromosomes. So essentially you are switching out the chromosomes and just getting new mitochondria. It completely fixes the problem. Your future children, well, that child now has 3 parents. They have the normal chromosome 46, 23 from each, and then you have the mitochondrial parent. Now the fact we can do that, we can't do the next one yet, but the fact that we could do that means that at some point we could say, like, chromosome number 1 we're going to get from Bo, and we're going to get chromosome number 2, and then 3 we're going to grab your chromosome 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 23, so we're going to go to another class. There's 46 in total, so we're going to pick matching pairs from the other classes. And we could put it all in a single cell, and that child would have 46 parents.
Oh, Jesus.
That is not hard. That doesn't involve genetic engineering. It involves very careful placement. But once that fertility starts to develop, there's nothing wrong with those chromosomes. It's not, they're complete in and of themselves. You're not missing any genes. You would just literally have 46 parents.
So you could have get any combination of traits, basically.
Yeah. You could get some traits from. It would be a way of mixing traits in a way that we have never done before. It's if I worked in a fertility lab, I could add a single one of my chromosomes to every egg.
That's illegal.
And then I'd be everybody's daddy.
No.
Yeah, it sounded wrong right when I said it,
It's
but
not really bad.
on the other hand,
Thomas-
it'd be like a little trademark. Everybody has my chromosome 1. Ha Yeah.
No.
What the hell?
Yeah.
It's a new film.
So, we are entering a brave new world of biotechnology. And this can be good. Like, you have a particular genetic disease that interferes with your functioning. You know what chromosome it's on. CRISPR might be able to fix it, But also, you could just replace that entire chromosome for your children. Get a fertilized egg, take that one chromosome, put another one from a donor, and then that child would have 3 parents. Mostly you, mostly other parents, and then 1 chromosome from someone else. That'd be 1/46 related to them.
That's so strange.
Yeah. This only works because you have 2 parents. You don't have to have 2 parents if you want to do some genetic engineering. So these form 23 pairs. Normally chromosomes in each pair are identical. And I have to say identical in their genes. They're not, they're identical in that they carry the same types of genes. So chromosome 1, and this is probably not true because I'm just randomly making it up, but let's say chromosome 1 carries the gene for eye color. That means they're both the same. They both carry the gene for eye color. But one could be brown, one could be, I don't know. Violet doesn't exist. Yeah. Yeah. That's apparently why it's so popular in video games. The other one could have for blue. Also, we're going to be doing Mendelian genetics. You have a picture on the back that shows you how that works. A lot of traits being dominant and recessive. This is not true for every trait. And eye color in particular has been used as an example of dominant and recessive for decades in school. So if your mom has blue eyes, and there's bio for each of these, and your bio dad had blue eyes, then you must have blue eyes. Those are recessive. You could not have brown, which is dominant. If you have blue eyes, it means you have both recessive traits. That's how it works. And it turns out that eye color is controlled by more than one gene, which means different chromosomes could affect genes could affect its expression. So it actually turns out it is possible to have 2 blue-eyed parents and have a brown-eyed child. It's rare, but there's other factors. So I just want you to keep in mind, I'm teaching you the simplest form of genetics. There is some complexity out there. So if you look at it and immediately discover, hey, my mom has this recessive trait. My dad has this recessive trait. I have the dominant trait. Something funny happened. No, you're not necessarily adopted. I mean, it's so often the stories come out that students discover that when they do genetics class. So yeah, there's a high chance you might be, but it's not 100% guaranteed. Although as a teacher, I do read those stories. And then there's always, every few years, it makes a newspaper somewhere. Child discovers in grade 10 genetics class that they were adopted, go home to adopt their parents. It is thankfully less often now.
HG's class? That happened in HG's class recently.
Did it?
Yeah, he knew a gene that a dominant gene that both his parents had, that they were looking for, and he didn't have it. No, a recessive gene both his parents had.
And he didn't have
have it, and he called his parents and we have something to tell you.
If the modern theory of how to, as parents, they have found that children who grow up knowing they're adopted psychologically adapt better. You're not supposed to tell them when they're older. I do know someone very close to me who found out when they were young. How they found out is they were walking with their older brother, and their older brother was like, our parents love me more than you.
Uh-oh.
And she was like, why? Well, I'm not adopted. And then they went crying home and asked their parents, of course it's not true. And they're like, actually, we have something to tell you. The younger you tell people, the better. And that, obviously, that was the big brother being a jerk. The parents have never given any indication they love one more than the other. In fact, I rather suspect they like the adopted one more because the older brother actually turned out to be a jerk most of his life. He's currently 52 years old and dating someone who's 21. And he's having his 9th child.
What?
With the 9th mother. It's a little weird. Okay. So, first of all, this is an idealized diagram of all your chromosomes. How do they order it? Like, if I take a picture under a microscope and I look at the chromosomes, eventually we figure out that is chromosome 1. They don't come labeled. So how did, before DNA technology and testing and everything, how did they know that chromosome 1 is chromosome 1? Yes. By size. They're ordered by size. And that's it. And so we didn't know what genes were on. They just look at it in the microscope and, oh, this is the biggest one. It's number 1. This is the smallest one. It's 22. These two are weird, and so they're the XY. We are showing you genetic chromosomes for genetic males, because that way we can show both chromosomes. If you are genetically female, you have Y. Sorry, not YY. That would be very wrong. You'd be missing a ton of genes. You have XX. This is why, if you are male, you are more likely to be colorblind, because the gene for your rods and cones are carried on the X. And as a male, you only have the X, one of them. Your Y doesn't even carry it at all. So your ability to see in color comes from the X chromosome. So you only got one shot. And if that is mutated, you're colorblind. So your colorblind is just more prevalent in male because it's a sex-carried characteristics on the X chromosome. The Y chromosome, for whatever reason, just lost the genes ages and ages ago. And over like genetic history, it's gotten smaller, a little bit bigger and smaller, but it just kept shrinking. That being said, I also, just as I was careful before to say biological male and female, I am careful to say genetic male and female, because you can have XY chromosomes and grow up morphologically female. You won't even know that you're an XY chromosome. It is possible for you to have children and never find out. However, most people do find out because many of those people with this condition turn out to be infertile. They can't have children. They're sterile, and they go to the doctor and they say, why can't we have kids? And the doctor does a genetic test and says you're genetically male. And in those cases, what has happened is they have a receptor on their, everybody has this receptor that allows you to respond to testosterone. Their receptor is broken, so although they're genetically male, none of their cells respond to the male hormone, so they just develop as full females. They're often known as hyperfemales if you talk about them genetically, because they don't respond to testosterone at all. They actually can get exaggerated secondary female characteristics. Which means higher cheekbones, a little wider hips, and they just look even more female than your average female. Yeah, question?
Wait, so it's like a guy, but like it's a girl, but it has like guy?
That's why we have to put prefixes in front of all of them. Genetically, we would say, if we just looked at the genetics, we would say, oh, man. But if we looked at how they look, we would say, oh, female. Like literally can have children.
Is it rare?
Yeah, it's pretty rare. Like these are not common.
Isn't it 1 in 10,000 females?
Yeah. Well, I mean, which is rare, but in a population of 7 billion people, there's quite a few of them. Yeah. And then again, how you feel you are.
Wait, so if you had kids who look like someone like that, then wouldn't the kid be a boy?
One of the problems, and it's really good if you know you have this, is to talk to a doctor about genetic counseling, because in that case, there's a possibility, a rare possibility. Often if eggs are made with double Ys, they actually don't survive, and so that it actually tends to self-select, but those eggs don't develop one. If it does, there is a chance that you could have a child born with double Y. That is actually a debilitating genetic disease, because you're missing a ton of stuff. So that is a problem. But if the eggs, I mean, because when you make eggs, you're going to make eggs with X or Y, right? Normally you'd make them with X and X. But if these don't survive, then your eggs are fine. It'll work. You remember when I said a few moments ago, like we could take a chromosome from everybody? You could make a clone of yourself that was an entirely different gender. So you just take one of your cells, take a fertilized egg, take out all the chromosomes, put in all of your chromosomes except for the Y, and just take your X and duplicate it. That would still be all you, but genetically female. And one of the things they have discovered, so we now have genetically male but morphologically female. But you can be morphologically male or female, and we now know that your brain can develop in all sorts of ways in which you actually feel as a different gender. And so we have gender as a social construct, we have gender as built into your brain, we have gender genetically, we have gender morphologically. So right here I'm only talking about genetics. Ordered by size. Now, how many pairs did I say humans have? 23 pairs. So 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs. We get one from mom, one from dad, or if we go with the child that's related to everybody in the class, one from each of you. This is then, you do get some unique situations. A horse has 64 chromosomes. How many pairs is that? 32 pairs.
Don't tomatoes have like 32, also 32?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but it would not surprise me. The number of chromosomes can be very species specific. A donkey has 62. So how many pairs does it have?
How many mules have it?
Aha.
Or pennies?
So I'll say mule, but it could be a hinny. How many chromosomes would a mule have? A mule is the product of a horse and a donkey.
It would have 60.
63. How many pairs is that?
31 and a bit.
Yeah.
61.
31
30. You can't have a half. And this is why mules are completely sterile. When they undergo meiosis and they have to divide that in half, one side gets an extra chromosome. It's already half horse, half donkey. And so when it gets some of them, something's going to be missing in the product, regardless of what it gets. Because the donkey one doesn't have all the DNAs, just getting some of them. You need all of them. So none of the, I can't remember if mules are hinny. Are mules always male and hinnies always female?
Yes.
I think so, yeah. So the spermatozoa from a mule are never viable, and same with the eggs. And also, I have to emphasize, this is incredibly rare. To even get a product when you have a different number of chromosomes is wildly improbable between two different species. It's sort of an exception that shows just how difficult it is, because the horse and the donkey are essentially have been separated by humans in terms of breeding. Their common ancestor is super close. They're almost the same species. There was a genetic mutation event in which they changed the number of chromosomes. Super rare. Now, the question has come up. Humans have 46. Apes have 48. How many pairs is that? 24 pairs. And there was a chimpanzee at a particular zoo. I believe his name was Charlie, but I have to look that up and double check. And Charlie was a bit odd, a bit more hairless than every other chimpanzee people had ever seen, liked to walk around on his hind legs, seemed to try to vocalize in a way that seemed very human-like, preferred the company of humans than to other chimpanzees they placed Charlie with. And eventually, people were like, okay, we know who Charlie's mom was, but was Charlie's dad a human? Because Charlie's just a little weird. Charlie just causes too many questions, let's say. And it turns out, no, that's completely impossible, because the product would need to have 47 chromosomes. Apes and humans are not as close as horses and donkeys. And if you had 47, the way that they're arranged, you would not get the correct number of genes. It is actually genetically impossible. Horse and donkeys, their chromosomes, in terms of which ones the mule gets, it is actually relatively impossible for it not to get a complete set of what it needs. As you can see, given that males are missing a ton off the X, you can be missing some of them as long as you have a copy. Mules always have a copy. The way these separate, the product would always be missing a major section entirely. So it's impossible for this to happen. But it led to enough questions, and it turns out Charlie actually wasn't a chimpanzee. Charlie was a bonobo, which is a very similar related species. It does look different. They do have less hair. Lots of chimpanzees like to walk on their hind legs. Lots of chimpanzees vocalize. It just turns out people who weren't used to seeing a bonobo just got confused. And every time that story would come up, they'd ask scientists, and scientists in the articles would always say, no, it can't possibly be, and would explain, and the newspaper article, wanting to sell clicks, would say, but who knows, and play up all the inconsistencies. But yeah, they actually eventually genetically tested Charlie, because enough people were like worried, and it turns out, yeah, Charlie's a bonobo. Just a bonobo. There's no possibility. Yes?
If there were, when the other human species existed,
Humans.
and we, and how human and modern humans share small parts of DNA with the older species.
Yeah.
But a species is defined as any group of creatures that can only
Reproduce.
and
Well-
then their children can reproduce.
You want to make a bunch of biologists sound really confused and ask them to define a species. A species is a group that only mates with itself. It's not that it can't mate with others, because it's blurry. I need a pen to show you. This is a really cool phenomenon. Why am I trying to draw in here? I have literally a whole board. Because we're doing evolution later, so this is on topic. It's just going to be later that we do evolution. Jesus. Okay. This is. Okay, fine. I'm using the mic.
It's
back.
It's back. Where's now? What is
Canada,
Canada? Oh.
U.S.,
Oh.
Mexico,
That's a really good job.
geography.
South America. As I've said before, I'm really bad at geography. South America.
Oh, yeah, I can see it.
Arctic,
That's where green.
Europe, Greenland, which is of course now part of the U.S., as will Canada apparently soon, and Panama Canal, also part of the U.S. According to Trump's latest speech, he's going to invade Greenland and Panama, and he's going to economically force Canada to become a state. Trudeau literally said the phrase, not a snowball's chance in hell. So, did appreciate that. Africa.
Didn't he also try and get
Okay.
Mexico?
There is, that is, the reason this is a point about what constitutes a species, and I really like this because it also tells us, it is an example of geography of what we normally see as an example of history. So there's a species of gull, so that's intended to be a bird, in Canada, lays its eggs. There's another, not a different species, but they don't often mate, different gull, but related, the great horned beaky gull, the great horned beaky gull with spots, the great horned beaky gull with even smaller spots. You get a gull. And then over here in Greenland, another type of gull. Actually, I think there's two types there that exist side by side. They can interbreed, they often don't. And then we have, I need more colors, Europe, Russia, Siberia stuff, and what China would be here. I think this is just mostly empty space.
Yeah, it is.
There's no countries in between there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gull. Please correct me if there's
What about Australia?
things. Australia doesn't exist.
There is Kyrgyzstan.
That was just in a movie.
No,
What?
it's real.
I want a different color. Okay, there we go. Okay, now here's the experiment, which they have literally done. This species of gull can mate and produce offspring with that species that are just a species. It's like taking two different dogs, you bring them together, you get a product which is also a dog. Are they literally different species? No. These two species can also have eggs, viable offspring, fertile. Are they different species? No. These two species can mate, have offspring, and they do fly back and forth. Are they different species? No. Same with these, same with these. At no point in this chain do you have any pair that cannot mate. However, if you take this species of gull and this species of gull and put them in a room, soft music, candlelight dinner, set them all up on a few dates, and do they get viable offspring? No, they genetically are incompatible. They cannot mate together, no viable offspring. So this is every step in a chain, they're all related, but at the ends are different species. So there's fuzziness to our definition, because you could never go, these are different species, but you can go, these are different species. And so biology tends to say, well, if they don't normally mate, we consider them different species. But there's arguments about it, because it is fuzzy. But now you can think about it in time. If this was an ancestor, and this was our modern form, then people say, well, how can any species develop? Because your kids are always related to you, they're never different species. Well, they were never different species in this line. Same if you do it by time rather than geography. They just evolve. The ends will be different, but the middles never are. This is known as a ring species. There's other animal examples in the world that are separated by geography that do that. So yeah, it is possible to have that. Now, you were mentioning the Neanderthals.
Yeah.
One theory as to their extinction is that we sexed them to death. Particularly if everybody in the world shares some Neanderthal genetics. If you're from northern Europe, Scottish, Welsh, you share more than average. If you're over on the Asian side, the least amount, but still some. It turns out Neanderthals and humans were very likely compatible genetically. You could have children, but they were separated. Mostly they didn't. And often they inhabited different areas. Modern humans evolved in Africa. Neanderthals tended to populate very cold northern areas. They were built for cold and they were built for strength. And then humans developed things like clothing and just spread everywhere. And we think Neanderthals and humans just looked at each other and went, "How you doing?" And had kids. And the kids all just became one species. And modern humans outnumbered the Neanderthals so much they just stopped existing as a separate species. We are technically the Neanderthals. We just have some of their genes. They just got taken out in evolution if they weren't useful, and we kept the other ones. They actually dug up a Neanderthal in England, can't remember what county, and they genetically, you can still get DNA out of them, and they genetically profiled it. We have the genome of the Neanderthals, and they said, wonder if it's related to anybody. So they genetically tested the local town. The school teacher was a direct ancestor.
You mean descendant?
Yes, that would be the right way around.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's.
So, when you say people don't move out of the small town, it's often true. This was an idealized picture. This is, hold it. What time does this class end?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. I wanted to give you some time. I'll stop there. I keep forgetting that Wednesdays are so short. I have a worksheet for you to work on. It's already been posted. And it says the due date is today. Do you have to hand it in today? No. The purpose of saying the due date is today is because later this week, I am going to do it tonight. I'm going to post you answers, and you're going to get a quiz on it next week, at the end of the week. However, the quiz will be open worksheet. So if you do, will it have the same questions as the worksheet? No. But if you've done the worksheet and understand it, will you do fine? Yes. But that way, if you like chat GPT your way through it, and you don't understand it, it's not going to help you very much. But if you understand it, you'll be fine. Bring it to class on quiz day, because when you're done, I'm going to have you staple it to your quiz before you hand it. You have the rest of this class to work on it.
I got one of the that you said I could use.
Oh yeah, you could have been using it the whole time. Tablet things to use as for notes.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So what you need to do, because I am bad at remembering, is I can take our notes, the blank one, and save it as a PDF, and then you should write on top of that. Do you know what app and stuff to use?
Yeah.
Okay, because if you, I like some grade 12s do it in my grade 12 class. I can always ask them.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with finding a good program for it to work. But yeah, that's absolutely fine. The active writing is good, and if you ever need to hand something in off of it, you just can print it as a PDF and then upload it. It's all good. If I ever say we're having an open book test or open note test, then just print off your notes.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's more the access to the internet and ChatGPT I'd be worried about, not the notes themselves. But yeah, that's fantastic. What program do you?